Okay, if you're after 6 rounds of action, I want to point you in the direction of this fight. Alexis Rocha versus Giovani Santillan. Very entertaining 6 rounds. Took place on Saturday on the Golden Boy card on the Zone. As I say, if you're after some action after watching Michael Lawal versus Chamberlain or Jack Catterall versus Linares, check this fight out because it was very entertaining. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed watching this one. I just really liked obviously the action in the fight, but also the kind of the dynamic between the two fighters. The flow of the fight was really kind of engaging to watch. Both guys southpaws, and typically southpaw versus southpaw matchups, they can kind of become stinkers because southpaws are quite rare relative to orthodox fighters, and then sometimes two southpaws don't have experience fighting each other, and that can mean there's a lot of clashing. It kind of they can cancel each other out a little bit, but this doesn't happen in that fight. Uh, this is a very good example of how two fighters who are familiar with each other, because the commentary were talking about how both guys have actually sparred extensively up until quite recently. I'm not sure the ins and outs of that, but it made sense because these guys, their styles, you could tell there was some familiarity there just by the way the styles gelled. Both guys being southpaws, but not the most not negative southpaws, but you kind of get slick southpaws who are kind of slippery. Both of these guys, they're kind of upfront in their styles. They're not too side on. They don't move excessively, and so one thing that stuck out to me straight away was seeing how both guys, they look like mirror images of each other. They were very similar in height, body proportions look quite similar, but also the posture and the kind of stance that they adopt, very similar. The way they hold their hands, the positioning of their bodies, and that kind of came together so that their punches kind of slotted in quite neatly, if that makes sense. Because you got some fighters, sometimes the posture they hold and the kind of stance they have, there can be a lot of clashing between hands, and it's just very awkward for one fighter to get off his offense or both of them to get off their offense. This wasn't the case. Both guys were able to land very cleanly, very able to place their punches, quite neatly. Made some very entertaining exchanges, some very clean work, which is always a plus. It's always good. I'm quite familiar with Alexis Rocha, as I'm sure most of you guys are. He weighed in Blair Cobbs, who many people weren't fond of, so he kind of got a few brownie points from a lot of boxing fans. I've got to be honest though, Giovani Santillan, I'm not actually familiar with. This is the first time I've heard of him. I've checked his record. I do actually recognise one name, which is Eric Bonnet, I believe you pronounce it, because he got flattened by Sean Porter way back in the day. I think that was like the early days of PBC. Is like one of their first few shows. Other than that, I don't recognise anyone on his record. But he looks to be a handful. He looks to be a good fighter. He's now 31-0, and yeah, he's stamped his authority with this fight because Rocha, as I say, has a bit of a profile and is a capable fighter. I really like Rocha's style. It's quite economical. It's quite textbook, but everything's done with a lot of competence and some good quality. He's kind of a jack of all trades. Moves around quite well. He can go back, he can go forward, he can go to the side. Decent up front, up close, decent at long range. A good all-rounder. Giovani Santillan seems to be a bit more of a clubbing kind of slugger almost. But there's still definitely some nuance to Santillan's work. I just feel like Rocha was a bit more of the technical boxer. And man, Rocha's must be bitterly disappointed because he had his fair share of success in this fight. But Giovani Santillan was just, I thought, too tough. I don't think Rocha's punches had enough firepower, enough stopping power behind them. Whereas Santillan, his punches really, he was making them count. I think he just has a bit more force behind them. They were a bit more damaging. Because both guys, as I say, had success. Both were very accurate. But you could just see, like, when you can tell a guy's punches are just heavier, just more damaging. And you're like, to the other guy, you can't afford to take too many of these. Whereas he doesn't have to worry so much about your punches. That was very much what I saw in this fight. And that was, I I feel like it was exemplified a bit more by the fact that Santillan was constantly advancing. Now, he wasn't rushing. He wasn't one of these fighters that's leading face first, willing to take one to give one. But he made it very clear that he was going to be constant, very consistent in his advances, but not throwing caution to the wind. I think he did have some respect for Rocha, which probably comes back to the sparring that they've both had with each other. But Santillan looking to come forward, still using long range boxing, but you could tell he was really at home up close, because he was just, when he got himself set up close at that kind of range, he was just letting these vicious combinations go with some serious velocity on them, serious venom on the punches. And they were just, I was really quite gobsmacked, I gotta be honest, because like in the 5th round, for example, he dropped Rocha twice. And the first, or both instances, both knockdowns, it's just a serious damaging flurry of punches in quick succession. The first one was kind of a combination of right hooks and left uppercuts from the southpaw stance. Just piercing accuracy, and the power behind them was really impressive. Just knocking Rocha's head around like a pinball. Rocha, to his credit, man, the heart he showed in this fight. He got up, always trying to stick it out. Like, there was never, I couldn't see an ounce of quit in Rocha. He wanted to keep going, because you could tell that he knew he was good enough from a technical perspective, but he just couldn't get Santillan's respect enough to buy some time and get some breathing room. And then the second knockdown in the 5th round, Santillan just pieced together like a quintuple, like 5 right hooks in a row, like Roy Jones Jr. style. And that just, once again, knocking Rocha around like a dummy, and then just floored him. But as I say, Rocha had that heart, man. He just saw out the round, got into the next one, got into round 6. But it was a similar thing. Santillan came in close and just let rip with those uppercuts and those right hooks. And interestingly, I think the commentary team said that Santillan is a naturally right-handed, despite the fact he's a southpaw. However, he's not one-handed at all. He throws power with both hands, and he throws that left hand well. Like, he can throw straight punches, overhand lefts, uppercuts, and they seem to be hard, damaging shots. So he seems to be a very dangerous man with both hands, which is unusual, because sometimes you see these converted fighters who they fight with the opposite stance that they should, so they have their strong hand leading. They can, be a little bit one-handed. Like, for example, Andre Ward didn't have much of a right hand. Sure, there are other fighters as well. But there have been plenty of examples over the years. They're just a bit one-handed. And they can have one good hand, but then you get fighters like Giovani Santillan who've got 2 great hands. So you're always in trouble, no matter where you are relative to them. I feel bad for Alexis Rocha, man, because he's going to think, man, it was a tough loss for him. I think he can come back, because I think he's a young man. He's like 26 years old. And he's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of skill. And you saw that skill on display here. But it was just, I feel like it was a bad stylistic matchup for him. Someone who's tough, who punches hard, and had skill of their own, against a guy in Rocha who has skill, has a lot of punch, a lot of technique at his disposal, but just maybe couldn't stamp his authority on the fight. But this was a really good fight. The kind of boxer-puncher versus the puncher-boxer, maybe. So, yeah, definitely check it out if you're after some action. I really enjoyed this one. If you checked out, let me know what you thought. Do you think that Giovani Santillan has a bright future ahead of him, or do you think this was maybe just a bit of a flash-in-the-pan type performance, and maybe you come unstuck? Because 147 pounds, there's some very good guys in that division. Of course, we've got top of the tree, got Terence Crawford. I would say Errol Spence, but I don't know. He might be damaged goods after that beating that Bud put on him. Got Jaron Ennis. He's obviously kind of top dog underneath the champions. And a few other guys as well. I know Mario Barrios has kind of made a name for himself because he beat Yordenis Ugas, beat the brakes off him, let's be real. So yeah, a lot of interesting matches to be made there. How do you think both guys do going forward? Do you think Rocha can come back, regroup, and carry on his kind of upward trajectory that he was on? And what do you think for Santillan? Leave it in the comment section below, people, and I'll get back to you for now. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.